Welcome back to the Lords of Lore Podcast Network. You listen to an episode of Ruminations, wherein Luka and I read a book and then discuss said book, both spoiler-free and spoiler-full. Today, we are talking about Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. If people are unfamiliar with Ruminations, the way the show works is either myself or Luka will recommend a book that the other one of us will then read. We'll come here and discuss the book. And this is going to be our spoiler-free discussion of said book. And this was actually your recommendation. So
Nice.
This one's actually interesting in that you hadn't read it before you recommended it.
Correct.
Even as far as like the synopsis, I think.
Nope.
And this book actually came up when we were talking about, collecting and owning books. It came up in one that you just, hey, cool cover, bought. And I can vouch for that. This is like the trade paperback version.
Mm-hmm.
The snake is like multicolored in this one. It fades to a nice teal at the bottom.
Yeah. That's nice.
This is actually my girlfriend's copy of the book because I recommended it to her after. But moving forward, I want to adopt something as we do these recommendations. So in most cases, and I've said this on our main show, which people can watch every Tuesday if they haven't seen it already, you give very concise and excellent pitches to things.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think for Rage of Dragons, you said African fantasy meets Game of Thrones, and I was sold. For Sword of Kaigen, you said Avatar for adults, and I said I'm in. And for this one, you're like, cool snake on the cover. But most times you give a very great pitches for things. This one's no exception. It's just funnier. But what I'd like to do now is that once the other one of us have read it, I will give you my pitch for the story now. And I will try to match your level of eloquent meets concise. So where was my pitch? I said Euphoria meets The Sixth Sense.
Okay, yeah, totally.
Good. Let's just get into it. I'll get your thoughts because I've been rambling here. What were your initial findings of the book?
So once I found out that it happens at Yale University, I was like, my enthusiasm took a sharp downward turn until I started reading it. And it was really well written. Like, I have nothing bad to say about the writing, and the character work is really good. I can't lie though, like every single time I read something that was like Yale or like New Haven or like something that puts us back into Earth, I would just get taken out of the story just a little bit. So because I've been so used to reading high fantasy and sci-fi stuff recently, and I think it was a barrier to my enjoyment. I did really enjoy this, but I won't say that it was like, I'm not like itching for a sequel, like I was with The Bone Shard Daughter, even though I had like no expectations for it going in, just like this one. But yeah, this was very well written. I think the strongest part of this book is how real the characters feel. And like you feel like people like a lot of these characters, and the things they go through are very real and relatable. And maybe like we've talked about this, like how one of the main criticisms of fantasy sci-fi is that it's like not real writing, quote unquote. And like this is a very good example of like exploring very real issues of modern society through the lens of a fantasy world, with like through the lens of the whimsical and the magical.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some very heavy themes in this book, and the author does an excellent job of like developing the characters and paying off what she sets up at the beginning. But yeah, again, like I was just always taken out of it because of the world building, or lack thereof. Even though there was, like with the houses and the magic system is very interesting, but it always took me out of it. So I don't know how you felt, because that was like what we were both talking about going into this book. So how did you feel about the setting?
And okay, so people of the main show who have seen this segment we did where I usually call them my therapy sessions, but you usually are, the forefront therapist and coaching me and why I had a tough time reading things that weren't specifically high fantasy and we're some sort of underground society based in the real world, and now our characters discovering it. The most, popular I think would be like Harry Potter as one where I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that falling into that category, but it absolutely does. For me, it's very tough. I think it's just the escapism that comes with high fantasy. It's totally different. I don't have to think about but there is also a part of me that's like, I would love to live in a world where there was an underground society that I could stumble on. And a character in this book actually says something to the same effect. Speaking about magic as a way of the world that they were promised. And now when that was revealed to them, it was like, so my childhood and the things I thought I'd seen and all that sort of stuff were justified. And now I'm getting sort of the benefits of that. But I was very much with you because obviously, again, like we said earlier, you were just like cool snake on the cover. It's like 3-dimensional. It's very cool printed. But when I read the synopsis, I was like, are you sure you want to talk about this on the show? And by that time, I had already purchased the audiobook, which I should say off the top too. I did this one by Audible. And so I was very hesitant going in, and I was very much not expecting myself to enjoy it. But I was like, hey, this is something that's very much out of our realm with the, small number of books that we have reviewed this far. So like, why not? And then I started looking up the author and seeing that she is, very accomplished, having her Grisha verse, I think it's called, being adapted, which I know is a little bit skews more like to younger adult fantasy, opposed to this one, which like reading this, I'm like, I don't know if I would be into her other works because I liked the realness of this. Right. And so I'll say as well, I enjoyed this book a lot, like thoroughly enjoyed this. And again, was not expecting to at all. Like you say, the real world aspects sort of take you out of the story. But I feel as though this book set up the characters so well, like you were saying, that even when they weren't doing magical things, I still wanted to know what was happening with them. I wanted a glimpse to their lives. And this book really takes the approach of a mystery. We're not only setting up the mystery, and again, we're staying spoiler free here, but the mystery of what happens in the book and how our main character, Galaxy Stern, is trying to solve said mystery, but also the mystery of the character herself and why she is the way she is, how she got to be here, and what things happened in her life previous that led to this. And as well as the mystery of another character we follow in the book no longer being present at the time that we're being told the story, if that makes sense. So there's a lot going that even when it was taking away from like the fantasy aspects of the story, I was still intrigued enough to keep reading or keep listening. And so, I would say like I actually am very much looking forward to the sequel just because I want to know more. It's not so much as like I want more of this world to be revealed, because I do think it takes like similar to what other properties that use the same, underground society type of world building. It's very much like, hey, this real person or real event that happened in real life, it was because of magic. And like, I'm honestly like a sucker for it. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. What if it was? There's specific things in this book. These aren't really spoilers, but there's things that have happened in New Haven and in the area of the campus that like are referenced in this book. And you're like, oh, that's cool. And it wasn't until I listened to an interview with the author afterwards and found out she actually went to school here, which makes total sense. And, she was very much inspired by her time there and all the weird sort of society, like these places really, these groups of people, I should say, really exist, which I wasn't aware of when I was reading the book, because like I just don't care about Yale that way in real life. So I was like, oh, cool. And then at the end of the book, it sort of has a list of these societies and members, like famous figures who are in them. And there's some really funny names that show up, but those are real. Like these people were actually part of these houses. The houses just don't practice magic as far as we know. So Yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think again, like Euphoria meets The Sixth Sense. There's things in here that you're like, oh, this poor young woman. And sometimes when we flash back, like this poor young girl, like dealing with all these things, it's tough to for me listen to, but I imagine for you to read as well. Like some of the things she has to go through. And when you're a kid, you go through things, and sometimes, when you try to tell your side of the story, you get dismissed as being a kid.
Mhm.
And then there's things like mental illness as well that play a factor in people not responding to what you're saying the way you think they should. And a lot of that is sort of present in this book. And yeah, it's super sad.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of those like real people, I actually read that part like maybe a quarter of the way into the book. And like when I got to one of the houses and I saw like George W. Bush, I was like, all right, I'm done for today. Like I'm out of here.
Which is actually one of the things. It's funny how we had a different feeling on that, because I remember in my youth, there'd be all these like documentaries about Illuminati conspiracies and stuff. And I remember seeing George W. Bush being part of one of those documentaries and actually being like, yeah, he was in the Society Skull and Bones. And I was like, oh, secret societies. And then it showed up in this book, and I was like, wait, that's real? I thought it was just some YouTube hysteria stuff. But apparently, yeah. So yeah. So that part for me was actually like, oh, cool. Like, let's just dive into this.
It was like I read Bush and then like an actress, and I was like, I can't. Like,
I think like Jodie Foster.
Yeah, it was Jodie Foster. Yeah, and I was like, all right, I think I'm going to take a break for a day.
Yeah, which like again, going into it, my feeling was that exactly. I was like, oh, like this young woman in Yale discovers magic and stuff. I was like, oh, this is really not for me. It's not to say it's bad or contrived or anything like that, but it's just not the high fantasy I usually am pulled towards. But I'm glad like you recommended it, because now I'm actually like pretty invested in this story. I love this character. By the way, I should mention the art that's behind us right now is by Irina Plakova, also known as Phantom Rim on ArtSpace and stuff like that. So check them out. They actually have a lot of really cool renditions of this main character, Alex Stern, here. So check them out. Do you have anything else you want to say spoiler free about this novel?
No, not really. Just to summarize, very strong character work and very good writing that takes you through. If you're a fan of low fan, or not even low fantasy, if you're a fan of like Harry Potter as a kid, this book is great for you. Like this is right up your alley. Yeah.
Also, if you found yourself diving into YouTube conspiracy theories as a youth, you might enjoy this too. I second that. Not like low fantasy, but if you're into that sort of approach to fantasy, this book is definitely for you. And I guess fair enough to issue some like trigger warnings. There are themes of sexual assault, murder, violence against women present in this book. So substance abuse as well. So be careful for those things if those are things that would trigger you. But apart from that, I could seriously recommend this book. And if I was, I would pitch it as Euphoria meets The Sixth Sense. That'll do it for our spoiler-free review. If you want to get us, diving into the deep details of this book, you can check out on our YouTube channel as well as in podcast form the spoiler heavy discussion of this book. But if not, check out our main show that we do again every Tuesday, and we play Dungeons and Dragons on this channel, and we also interview people about their nerdy, not so guilty pleasures. As always, I'm Matt.
I'm Luka,
and we are the Lords of Lore.